What's your name, son?
I don't need one.
Solo.
Welcome to the Mad Max Minute presents Waterworld H2O minutes at a time. I'm Rick.
And I'm Julia.
And today we're talking about minutes 95 and 96, which begin with Enola clapping back at the Mariner and end with the Mariner taking back his crayon. Our special guests today are Pete the Retailer and Tom Taylor from ABC Devo.
No relation.
Separated at birth. Hello.
Hello. Yeah, we're from ABC Devo and currently ABCDTOS. We're doing Star Trek. We've been in a sci-fi vein lately.
Yes.
So we're ready for Waterworld, because that's sci-fi, right?
Yeah.
You would call it sci-fi.
Absolutely.
It's totally fiction, so...
Future and whatnot.
Yeah.
It's more that Bradbury and sci-fi where it's like how we deal with technological advancement, in this case, the aftermath of technological advancement versus aliens coming down and zapping stuff.
So how many different alphabet-themed podcasts have you guys done? Just the two, or are there more?
Well, you, Pete, did Alphabetical.
I did Alphabetical with Alex, who I do Star Wars Minute with, and our friends John and Adam. And then that caused a little, not as much of a community as Movies by Minutes, but there's a handful of other alphabetical musical podcasts out there. And so Tom and I and John Ingle from Alien Minute and 007x7 and our friend Joe Maisel, we decided to do Devo a while back. And then once we were done with that, we're like, all right, what do we do next? Because we like talking to each other. And we couldn't land on there were no other bands that hit all four of us in the same way. And we also felt a little bit sheepish about the lovers not experts thing, as they say in James Bonding, where it's just like, yeah, I love Devo, but then when we start talking about the actual musical stuff, we feel like idiots. We're not experts.
Yeah. Music is hard to talk about.
The only common ground, like the main common ground that we found was we talked a lot about Star Trek. So then we're like, oh, why don't we just do the Star Trek, the original series in alphabetical order? And that hit everybody the right way.
There's a lot to love about that original Star Trek, just because of how earnest they all are.
Yeah.
It's super bright colored earnestness, and it's not too concerned with creating a saga. It's just like, here are some stories.
I just watched one this morning that I hated, and I still had fun because it's a good show. At its base is a good show. Spoilers for Pete for our next recording.
Oh, boy. I was like, wait, you went back and watched Cat's Paw again? Why?
I love going back to where series started.
Mm-hmm.
Going back to reading the first book, watching the first movie, watching the first series, and like revisiting the innocence before it was this big whole thing.
Yeah.
It's like going back and watching A New Hope when it was just a movie.
Yeah. It wasn't all locked down.
Yeah.
I'm trying to think of any time when my favorite in a series is not let's put the gang together and like obviously this is in release order, as is my one. I'm not going to count Phantom Menace although Phantom Menace is my favorite of the prequel trilogy. So it's like that initial kind of like world building, kind of setting everything up is usually my favorite chapter of each saga. So I agree.
I think Mad Max 79 is still my favorite Mad Max movie.
Oh, cool.
Yeah, it definitely had a lot of that let's get the gang together and make a movie energy.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Figure out what we're doing. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Pete, earlier you mentioned finding common ground, and I think that's a good leaping off point for this clip, because as we begin, Enola, who is sitting there, cheeks stuffed with a fish that was killed by the Mariner in last week's episode, she points out maybe they were right about you too, and that's a response to the exchange that they had at the end of last episode where Enola says, oh, people said I was weird, and the Mariner's like, oh, maybe you're right, and then she fires back with maybe they were right about you too.
This statement, it confused me because I had to go back and check what it was in reference to.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
But she delivers it in a kind and generous way. Like she's complimenting him. But I checked back and wait, she's not.
Right. Maybe I wasn't wrong about you. It's like, wait, what?
Wait,
I thought you were weird.
What?
Is she referring to the people in the atoll who were like, oh, he's a mutant, he's a weirdo, is that what she's referring to? That's the assessment of people that or of him, that maybe they were right?
Yes.
Okay, because I was unclear on that too at first.
Although
he should be, put to death. That's
Yeah,
what she's agreeing with.
That's what she's saying.
Yeah, maybe they were
Yeah.
right
You
about
were
you.
right that you should have been killed.
Take
Yeah.
that, you. Thanks for the fish.
Rick Aviles did want to kill both of them. We saw him in Ghost. We know he likes to kill people, but still.
Sure.
It's been a long time since I brought him up. I love that guy.
Yeah. That's great.
By the way, speaking of people in other movies, I want full credit for recognizing this little girl as also being in Napoleon Dynamite and Veronica Mars. I was like, she looks a lot like the girl. Oh my gosh. Okay, I looked it up. There she is. Hooray.
Excellent.
I pat myself on the back for that.
Costner gets a lot of focus here at the end of this scene before we transition into the next one. And initially, I'm sure he's a little miffed that Enola talked back to him, but he kind of set her up for it. And at the end of the day, it's the point where Enola is like, hey, you are not this gruff loner that no one can sympathize with. You and me, we have a similarity. We both were going to get murdered by Atolers and tossed into a body pit.
Sometimes that's all it takes.
Yeah. That's the basis for any strong relationship.
Right.
I haven't seen The Greatest Showman, but I think that was one of the themes that weirdos got to
That
stick
we're
together.
all outcasts.
Right.
Yeah.
Is that meant to be like a super deep, like not only finding ground, but finding common ground?
Ah.
Is that supposed to be the actual theme that we're all adrift in the world?
The real dry land was the people we met along the way.
Exactly. In that, it was a bunch of bodies floating, and we were able to stand there.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's not dry land. Huh.
No.
The Mariner does eventually end up bonding with both Helen and Enola, but his bond with Enola is different. I think it's deeper. It's richer than his bond with Helen, which is, whatever.
And I wonder if it starts right here.
I think it does. Because he smiles a little bit. The corner of his mouth twitches upward.
I was wondering about that too. It's a little, Mona Lisa. It's like, wait, am I seeing a smile or is there actually a smile? Am I just looking for one so I see it or is it there? I can't tell. But yeah, I mean, there's enough there that maybe it's there. And Rick, you said that, that he set her up for her comeback, like, oh, maybe they were right about you. And I almost wonder, like, he's such a loner. He probably doesn't plain old talk to a lot of people. So I think that her comeback to him is like out of nowhere to him. It's like a slap in the face almost. He's like, oh, look at this. She came back at me with a little thing to make me think about myself in a different way. Son of a gun.
I 100% thought that she was going to do a Bluto style, just kind of spit food out. Like, would that have earned his respect in the same fashion? I don't know.
She does seem primed for it.
Because her cheeks are very full. She was like, like.
I would not believe my eyes if the Mariner says, oh, maybe they're right. And then you cut back to Enola and she said, do you want to see an impression? And then she does the Bluto thing.
Yeah.
Right.
Try to guess what I am now.
I would be flabbergasted if that's what they did as some sort of
So gross.
call out.
And that's how
Yeah.
they bond. It's a food fight. And they're like, oh, you know what? You're okay.
Yeah. Out of all of leftover humanity, they're the two who remember Animal House.
That would certainly add to Enola's golden child framing. Oh, she's the one child who just magically remembers Animal House.
Right.
She had cool parents and then,
Yeah.
I put down in my note that the Mariner is not the type of man who will sit there and be lectured by a chipmunk just because of the way her cheeks are packed with food.
Yeah.
I do have to wonder, production-wise, what is in there?
I was wondering that too.
What did they
Yeah.
stuff her mouth with to get this look? But she still is able to speak very clearly.
Yeah.
Probably not cotton balls, Corleone style, because
Yeah.
she is still able to talk and get the lines across, unless we think it was ADR'd or something.
And you figure it's gotta be like take after take, and like, is it something she just leaves in there, or is it like she spits into a bucket between takes or something?
It sounds so awful.
Yeah.
I remember we used to play the game Chubby Bunny. We would do it with either marshmallows or grapes. Why grapes? This is a horrible idea.
Ew.
And you just stuff as many in your mouth as you can while still being able to clearly say Chubby Bunny.
Wow.
And then whoever gets the most in there wins. But I think we all lose. Because either you have two options and you could consume the marshmallows or grapes.
Mm-hmm.
Or he could spit them out.
Right.
Either way, everybody loses.
It's like when you propose the game, you're like, do we really want to start down this road? We know how it's going to end.
Yeah.
And as kids, yes, we do want to go down this road.
Why not?
You don't really think that far ahead, and so it's like, oh, cool.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Nobody thinks about cleaning it up. Like,
Right.
hey, am I going to have to sweep up a bunch of chewed up
my
grapes?
My parents would play it with us.
Oh,
It
wow.
wasn't just us kids. It was the whole family.
They should know better.
Were they tricking you? Is it like, let's play Chubby Bunny with Brussels sprouts? You know?
Yeah. But no spitting.
Yeah.
I would want to see the Blue Man Group play Chubby Bunny because
Oh my God,
if you've
yeah.
seen their stage show, they have that thing where they throw marshmallows across the stage and they shove an entire bag of marshmallows into their mouth. It's disgusting.
And
It
then
is.
regurgitate it into like a little mound.
Oh, gosh.
It's impressive.
Yeah, I bet they're very popular in certain circles. Anyway, we are left looking at the Mariner as he goes back to his slicing, and thankfully, because it's a movie, we can cut away from awkward pauses to see the Trimaran sailing across the moon. I thought, oh man, there are so many movies where the moon looks so massive, and instead of getting caught into a research hole of all of the movies where that happens, like E.T. and Joe versus the Volcano, I instead got sucked into how you do that visually, because it's just a camera effect. It's not CG.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
And it's all about the kind of angle lens that you're using. If your camera is close to your subject and the moon is behind your subject and you're using a wide angle lens at close range, the moon is going to look tiny. But if you move the camera back and use a telephoto lens, the moon stays the same size, but because the camera is so far away and you're zooming in on your subject, the moon is going to appear larger.
Yeah.
There's a cool video of this effect. You go on YouTube, look for Vsauce, a video called The Sydney Opera House Illusion. The host, Michael, went to Sydney and he was in his hotel room, and looking out his window, he could see the Sydney Opera House. And when he's standing across the room looking through the window, the Opera House looked massive because the window was cutting off his field of view. And as you get right up against the window, suddenly you can see the whole city. And the Opera House, in comparison to everything around it, appears quote unquote smaller. But as you adjust your placement back and forth with the window framing everything, the Sydney Opera House appears to grow in relation to the rest of the room. It's very cool. Highly recommend checking it out.
Cool.
I will.
Vsauce is awesome. I really enjoy his videos.
They do some great stuff.
So you didn't find a list of other... I'm not dismissing your discovery, because I'm interested in, I'm intrigued in your discovery, but then also once you mentioned it, then my mind started being like, wait, where else are they in front of the moon like that?
Yeah. Pete, you come from a movie that is famous for things that are and are not moons.
Yeah,
Right.
that's true.
Yeah.
I can silhouette it in front of not a moon. I got that. I'm sorry.
But no, the two ones that I initially thought of are the ones that I mentioned, E.T., and when I searched on Google image search, Joe versus the Volcano popped up as well.
Right.
But are there other movies that you guys can think of, excluding the movie Melancholia, where the moon is literally falling towards the earth?
I feel like there have to be some really obvious ones that if we did look it up, we'd be like, oh, of course. But I can't think of, I can think of some sun ones, like sunsets or sunrises.
Yeah.
Can't I? I'm picturing that shot from Raiders where they're all digging. It's the silhouette of Indy and the diggers and stuff. But is the sun actually in that shot?
I mean, that's the scene that I thought of, too.
Yeah.
Oh, I found it on TV tropes. Here we go. Let's see. Where's movies? Films, live action. There we go. E.T. Last Action Hero. It's a parody of E.T. It's like all parodies of E.T. It's like Naked
Wow.
Gun 2.5, Spy Hard. Oh, Batman, where the Batwing goes up in front of the
Yep.
moon.
I was
There you go.
thinking of that, but is that actually really huge? Is the moon that big in that shot? I remember it being a sort of...
appropriately sized to turn into
Okay.
the bat symbol. I don't know. I would count it.
I'll allow it.
Even Malcolm X has a scene which is an homage to E.T.
Oh my God. Spielberg.
Sure.
Yeah, I don't know. When you said it, the first thing I thought of was Joe versus the Volcano, and then I was like, oh yeah, an E.T., I guess. But I'll have to keep an eye out for it.
Yeah, that sounds like a fun little bit of engagement. So listeners, go on the Facebook page and give us all of those movies where the moon is super big. This scene that we're coming into, it is supposed to be the night after the dinner scene that we just left. But as we cut in on Enola, she is asleep on the netting with a crayon in her hand, and there's a piece of scrap fabric lying on the netting. And the picture on the scrap is depicting a scene that has not yet happened in this movie. Basically, the mariner teaching Enola how to swim.
Oh, interesting.
Oh, yeah. Okay, I didn't really notice the water and the waves. I thought it was just a picture of the two of them.
Yeah, so did I.
But you're right. Yeah, it totally is.
Couldn't that just be like, that's something she would want to have happen? That's something she's wishing for?
Yeah.
It's like a Christmas list.
Yeah, things to do.
Dear
Learn to swim,
Santa.
go to sleep. Yeah.
So far in this movie, Enola has drawn a lot of things that she has seen before. And in my mind, I was chalking the placement of this scene up to this being ultimately a fan edit. The extended edition is cut together from all of these different places, and they decided to put it here. But, and I'm really glad that you brought this up, Tom, this could be Enola drawing something that she would want to happen, because she noted in the last scene she wishes she had webbed feet so she could swim like the mariner, and so she drew a picture of the mariner teaching her how to swim.
Okay, I want to bring something up
Please.
that I brought up a couple weeks ago. Rick shot me down hard.
Oh, boy.
Like, it killed the conversation. He shut me down so hard. And I don't know if you've edited that episode yet, but I'm sure you had to fix that.
Edit with care.
I brought up the idea of her drawing, instead of just being simply a child's proclivity to draw on things, which is very normal and adorable and all of those things. Instead of being that perhaps her drawing is motivated by something deeper. Not necessarily supernatural, but I'm open to the idea that it's supernatural. But like this inner drive, I must draw. I have these things in my head that I don't know where they came from. And it turns out that they're memories from when she was a baby, which doesn't happen. That's not a thing. She feels a need. She has to draw these things, horses and trees and whatnot. So I am very open to the idea of some sort of supernatural motivation and ability here, because, and I'm not sure I made this point strongly enough last time, she draws horses and trees. She does not remember horses and trees. That is information that is in her brain that her conscious self does not have access to.
Yeah.
So her drawing is, I don't know, something more than just normal. Along those lines, this drawing of the mariner teaching her how to swim, perhaps it is prophetic. That she is dreaming of it or wishing it, that he would teach her how to swim, therefore he does.
The first time they show her drawing, which I think is something big is going down on, there's a big action piece going down. Aren't they like beating up the mariner or something on the atoll? And she's drawing what's happening or almost what's about to happen. Like the first time we saw her draw, I did kind of have the sense that like, oh, there's something up with this drawing. And maybe it's just from like other science fiction movies or Stephen King books or something. Oh, there's going to be something up with this kid. It's not just a tattoo on her back. There's something going on with her.
Right.
Like she knows something or she's attuned to something.
She is the chosen one.
She is the chosen one.
Yes.
That doesn't sound crazy to me. I kind of had that sense going in that there was something going on with this drawing. Rick, you're wrong.
Yeah.
Could we double down? Could we add layers to that then like she is predicting her getting taught swimming, and then the horses and trees and stuff that she is drawing is not memories, but they're looking further ahead to later.
Maybe.
Once things, I don't know, far in the future.
Yeah.
I really like that all of her drawings are looking forward, that she is a seer.
If only she could have drawn a picture of them figuring out that you have to reverse the directions on the thing and stuff, and then they can get there faster. And
I don't know if it's because I've grown as a person, but I'm definitely more open to that idea at this point in the movie.
Oh my gosh, that was like 3 weeks ago that happened.
Yeah. Which means it was months ago
Yeah.
in podcasting time.
I'm open to that idea strictly because this is not my movie, and I won't have to deal with the repercussions of that idea.
right.
If we were to throw something like that into Star Wars, I'd be like, whoa. Like, there's serious implications for what
Right.
But I'm just a visitor here, so I'm like, yeah, she can see the future, sure.
There's a lot of safety in reviewing a more obscure movie like Waterworld, where you know that there aren't going to be people leaping to the Wikipedia every 5 minutes.
But the people who do are going to be hardcore about it. That's the problem.
Oh, that's a good point.
That's very true.
I've noticed this with quote unquote bad movies podcasts, some of whom, are done by people whom I love and respect. And when they tackle something that I have a strong fondness for, I'm like, no, wait, you don't get it. No, that's...
You can't just dismiss it like that. Stop it. Yeah.
Going back to the order of scenes real quick, the reason I thought, this got jumbled up is because in the novelization, which was based on, I'm assuming, an earlier version of the script, the swim lesson scene happens before this.
Oh, interesting.
Which I find weird. It doesn't belong yet. It's not time yet.
The way they frame it up is that they have their little family dinner. Helen is full of fish and decides to take a nap. And so when she wakes up, that's when the swim lesson is happening. And this is the postmortem wrap up to, hey, thanks for teaching Enola how to doggy paddle and all of that. It really strips away any possibility of Enola being a little Cassandra type seer.
I'm sure that really, it's edited out of order.
Right.
Yeah.
But you've talked me into this order. You've talked me into it liking.
But maybe it's edited out of order on purpose.
Yeah.
How it was intended has little bearing on how it's perceived.
Exactly.
Right.
This is the canonical.
Yeah.
Water cannon.
Right. Helen picks up the scrap of fabric from Enola, walks over, and finds the mariner sitting on the bowsprit, and he is listening to a little wind-powered CD player. Taking the image and spinning it around and zooming in, I wasn't able to find out more about the content of what he's playing other than he's got a Miles Davis CD, which, for our listeners' benefit, Miles Dewey Davis III was born May 1926, died September 1991, was an American jazz trumpeter, bandleader, and composer. He is among the most influential and acclaimed figures in the history of jazz and the 20th century. Davis adopted a variety of musical directions in a 5-decade career that kept him in the forefront of many major stylistic developments in jazz. Aside from that case, for the Miles Davis album, there is another CD off to the side from Laserlight Digital, which is a budget label for Delta Music based out of Los Angeles, California. Other labels in the Delta Music family include Time Life Music, Reader's Digest Music, and Capriccio.
Wow.
I definitely had, I think, more classical than jazz because I've got a big blind spot when it comes to jazz. Every once in a while, I think about filling in that blind spot, and then a scene like this makes I'm good. But
I'm exactly the same way.
Yeah.
Like, I feel like I'm missing out on something, but that's probably fine.
Yeah. But I definitely had classical CDs that were from Laserlight, that same kind of imprint. And I'm not a huge classical person either, more so than jazz. So I recognize that. I'm like, oh, yeah, that. Like, I remember going to Tower Clearance and getting some $2 Laserlight CDs.
There's been talk earlier in the podcast about when exactly this movie takes place, and we've talked about hundreds of years. Among the manufacturers that have done testing, there is a consensus that under recommended storage conditions, which I'm sure does not include anything about rising global seas and everything like that, that compact discs should have a life expectancy of 100 to 200 years.
Oh.
So if we are too far in the future, there's no way he's listening to Miles Davis on CD, unless it was sealed vacuum tight under the water.
Right.
I guess there are a lot of factors.
I think the player has a much shorter shelf life than that. How is this player
Laser
playing?
diode.
Oh, because it's got anti-skip technology.
Ooh,
Oh,
okay.
hey.
Well, that clears everything up. But the electrical components would have degraded, especially with salt.
Yeah, I had a hard time getting my Discman to play normally on, not in the apocalypse on dry land.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I can't imagine on a boat in the future.
I had a Discman that I would listen to on the bus going to school, and I had to hold it very carefully so that it would play normal.
Yeah.
Oh, sure, yeah. I remember my friend was one of the first people I knew to have a CD player in his car, like actually a component in his car, like in the dashboard. And we're like, oh my gosh, this is so great. Until we started driving and we'd hit a bump and the thing would skip and be like, all right, it's not quite there yet. I'll see me in a year. Then I'll think it's cool.
At the end of the, not the end of the lifespan, but kind of right when the things were almost starting to change, my friends bought me, I think for my birthday, my roommates got me a Discman that would also play a CDR full of MP3s.
Ooh.
And it was like, oh, this is the future. And I got on the bus, to go to work, and I had carefully curated this disc of MP3s, and I go and I hit play, and like about 2/3 of the way through the first song, it died because reading the MP3s was a super battery drain that you can only do when it's plugged in. And so I was like, oh. I was like, if you can only
car battery, put it on your backpack.
It's plugged in, why would I do that? Why wouldn't I just play it off my computer? But
wow.
Oh, I have fond memories of my first MP3 player because it was basically a USB thumb drive that had a big chunk of plastic with a headphone jack adapter, and you would plug the thumb drive from your computer into this extra chunk of plastic, and that's where you would have your play, your pause, your next, your back, your headphone jack. And it was such an easy transition from stuff on the computer to stuff on the player, and I was never one of those people that really had a lot of success getting iPods, so that was my first MP3 player.
Yeah.
I kind of skipped over the portable MP3 player phase. I had my Discman for a long time. Oh, probably until I had a car of my own and no longer needed it. Yeah.
Right.
I was just looking through in a desk drawer next to me with a bunch of no longer current iPhones. I thought I also had an iPod in there that I rescued from Alex Robinson. That he held on to the iPod for a really long time because it's a good for music. It's much better. Oh, there!
I just looked in the drawer next to me and I did find an iPod.
Oh.
Yeah, look at that.
Yep. I do have an iPod somewhere.
I feel like I was just a Discman tourist. Like I never fully got into it. I just did it because it's like, okay, this is good for now. This is what we're supposed to do. But I held on to cassettes for probably longer than I should have, and then jumped, like, just barely touched on Discman right into MP3 players.
Yeah.
My timing was a little bit odd. I started out on cassettes. I didn't have a Walkman, though, just a cassette player in my bedroom sort of thing. Mm-hmm. But I switched over to CDs pretty early. I don't know. I was maybe 11, 12 when I switched over to CDs. So I didn't have very many cassettes. And then I was just on CDs for a long, long time.
Yeah. Briefly, I was recording an interview with somebody, a musical artist who was very young. The interviewer was talking about, like, so what kind of music did you listen to growing up? And she talked about, all kinds of, stuff that, like, my parents listened to this and this. And he's like, just whatever kind of popular stuff was on, throw on a record. And she was like, oh, no, they weren't hipsters. They weren't cool. They just had it on CD.
Oh, wow.
She was young enough that they're like, vinyl is cool and not the old thing that happened before a CD. It was just like, no, normal people listen to CDs. And if you're cool, then you're...
Oh, my God.
Completely with a straight face. She was like, they weren't cool. They just had it on CD. They didn't have...
Well, for that generation, they should come out with like a portable, I don't know, like 45 player that goes on your hip, and it's awful. Like every move you make ruins everything. But just give it a try. See if it'll, throw them a bone.
I imagine if people are careful enough and dedicated enough, you could probably preserve your vinyl records in an apocalyptic situation.
Mm-hmm.
Sure.
I know we've talked about them in the past. We've actually seen vinyl records in a Mad Max movie before, specifically from Thunderdome.
Right.
And it turned out to be a French lesson, which, how disappointing that must have been.
Yeah. The records lasted longer than French.
But I imagine, if people cared, you could probably preserve your CDs, preserve your vinyl. You'd probably be better off preserving your vinyl because the technology to play the disc is a bit more low tech.
Yeah.
You could do it with a needle and a cup.
Exactly.
If you try that with a CD, it doesn't work. Believe me, I know.
If this movie was made like, I guess like now or something, and you still wanted to have the scene, wouldn't it probably be a turntable? They wouldn't try to like go back to the CDs. They wouldn't, or even a cassette. Because you're right. I mean, it is like it's a needle, and vibrations go through the needle, and it comes out of a speaker. You can imagine people cobbling that together in that time. Yeah, 1995 is screaming at us when we see this CD player.
Yeah.
Although you don't get that really subtle, non-existent pun of it being a CD.
Right.
Oh,
Ah.
nice.
I agree. If this movie was made today, this would be vinyl
Yeah.
Yeah,
in this scene. Yeah.
or like a big wax cylinder.
Well, especially if you're going to be like, I mean, I guess it was a 90s attitude of being like, oh, if you're a real, jazz fan, you want to hear it as clear as possible. So you would play it on you can sense my disassociation with jazz and the jazz quote unquote scene. But like you would want to, in the 90s, I feel like it was very much like, oh, here, I'm going to subject you to a demonstration of how awesome this sound setup is by playing some really loud jazz. And that it seemed like that kind of a thing, like, oh, like jazz is perfect for now. You can really capture all the sounds, and this is what jazz is all about. Whereas I feel like now it's gone back to being like, no, man, you want the warmth of a vinyl recording. You want that, analog sound to really capture what it's like live. So I feel like if they did it now, it would definitely be vinyl.
Yeah.
There was a video on YouTube. I keep bringing up YouTube this episode, but a presenter named Brian David Gilbert did an examination of what kind of music would thrive in an apocalypse. Mm-hmm. And his final conclusion was that ska was the perfect post-apocalyptic genre of music.
Interesting.
Mostly,
I don't strongly disagree. I'm very curious about the reasoning.
Yeah.
it's very percussive. It's very loud. It's very exuberant.
Mm-hmm.
If you are in the midst of a vehicle armada, you can blast it out really loud. Speaking of vehicle armadas, you could go the easy route and say, oh, well, it's an apocalypse. You're going to have drums and you're going to have weird cobbled together flame-throwing guitars. You're going to have the Duff Warrior.
That's true, I guess. Go back to the first instruments that we were able to make. You got percussion and you got horns, essentially. So all right. I'm picturing like a ska group made of like banging on, animal skins and blowing through ram horns. And
Is there any
still
ska with a
wearing,
didgeridoo?
Suits and stuff.
Yeah.
They're still cool.
Yeah, the post-apocalypse is going to be a wonderland for a cappella and barbershop quartets as well.
I drink my pee.
Oh.
Yeah, there's going to be a lot of college and university level glee clubs when the world ends. They're going to be like, now is our time.
Right.
We will be the kings of music.
I foresee a possibility where the apocalypse is brought on by those groups, like a secret cabal of a cappella groups, so that they can shine.
Yeah.
They hate regular musicians so much.
They will destroy the world.
They sent out like an electromagnetic pulse to like, now no one can have electricity and we will all sing in harmony.
Right.
Keith Richards, who is still alive, is like, oh, my electric guitar won't play now.
Yeah. Dylan is now acoustic again.
Right.
You guys sent me the epic length version, the Ulysses cut, which I told you I could not get to work on my computer for some reason. So I just rented the regular version, which is still, like 2.5 hours or something like that. And this moment with the CD player is not in that version, which I found kind of interesting. And her questioning, like, hey, what's your name? I was like, I don't need a name. Like, that's not in there either. So it's kind of interesting that these two little pieces are not in the theatrical version.
I think I understand why. I don't think this scene really drives the plot forward much. I mean, it does show some kind of normalizing of their relationship aboard the Trimaran, which has been quite fraught up till now.
Mm-hmm.
It's nice, but I don't think it's required.
You got to show at least one instance of Helen warming up to the Mariner somehow.
Yeah.
Sure.
And it does clarify that he doesn't have a name.
Mm-hmm.
Because in this edition of the movie, that is an important detail.
Yeah.
Oh, right. Yeah. When I saw that like the CD thing was in there, I'm like, did they cut that just because it's raises too many questions? Like we just spent 20 minutes talking about CDs. They're like, no, really? Wait a minute.
I think it was music rights. They couldn't.
Right. They couldn't. The Miles Davis estate wasn't playing ball.
30 seconds of generic jazz.
Yeah.
I was trying to think about if I suddenly found myself in the apocalypse, what CDs would I want to have hooked up to my little pinwheel CD player? And I know it's kind of a cop-out, but I think I would want greatest hit CDs.
Yeah, I made a list of CDs I would think of, and I have a greatest hits on there, and I'm like, that's fair. In this situation, that's fair. You know, that's appropriate. You want a nice collection of stuff.
Yeah, I don't want it to feel like pandering, but like one of the CDs that I would want in the post-apocalypse is the Beatles' One album, where it's just all of their number one hits on one disc.
Sure.
I can see that.
Yeah, that's a good idea. I did not do that. Although my choice is a soundtrack, so it does have a variety of musicians on it.
Yeah.
The CD that I would bring is the Bodyguard soundtrack.
I was just about to say, I bet it's the Bodyguard.
Wow.
For a couple of reasons. For one, it was my very first CD. It was for my 12th birthday. It was my very first CD. And it's Whitney Houston. Duh. Plus, it has 5 or 6 Whitney Houston songs and then like 5 or 6 other people songs.
Cool.
And there's only one song on that whole entire CD that I don't like. So that's pretty good.
Yeah.
Not bad.
It's Aaron Neville. I don't like Aaron Neville.
That's funny because I think Aaron Neville is on one that I would include. And this is probably because more of just association with it. And like I would make this decision. And then after like 2 years in the apocalypse, I'd be like, damn, I should have taken something else. But the Pump Up the Volume soundtrack, I listened to so much at the time. Oh, no, it's Ivan Neville. Sorry. Ivan Neville does Why Can't I Fall in Love, not Aaron Neville. I knew there's a different Neville. But then also you have the problem of some of the best songs from the movie are not on the soundtrack. And so it's a weird, I think just purely for nostalgia, I would want that one. And it has to go back to soundtracks, I feel like. It depends on who's with me, too, because I feel like if I'm not going to have a movie, I would, like listening to the soundtrack from the original Star Wars is very evocative of the movie in my head, so I could replay it. But also, if I'm with my family, they're going to get really tired of me just constantly like barking out all the lines while the music is going on. And I'm just like redoing, like, it could be fun, though. I guess maybe we could turn it into a, like, no, now you say holding her is dangerous. Make it into a, like, depends on the scenario, I guess. But soundtracks, I think, definitely could be the way to go.
As a side note to what you were just saying, Pete, that is my favorite scene from Reign of Fire, where Christian Bale and Gerard Butler are doing that. But one soundtrack that I just thought of that may not necessarily win me any points, but the first Shrek movie had a very fun soundtrack.
Okay, I had that soundtrack too. And it was an excellent soundtrack. It was on my regular rotation because it is an amazing collection of songs.
Yeah, it's very fun.
I had a lot of soundtracks.
I was also thinking about, well, two things. This all ties back to CDs. And I think CDs in their natural habitat are just scattered around a dorm room floor. And so that leads to two different things. And one, like, I had a hard time explaining to my kids exactly why, like, certain songs totally stick out and I get a little bit of, like, anxiety because I know that's where the skip was. That's where the scratch was. And the CD would always skip during that song. I'm like, no. Like, you have to, this is where, just keep going and going and going.
I have a Christmas song that was in heavy rotation as a child, and it was on vinyl. So it had a skip in the same place every single time. So now when I listen to that song, I listen to it often on YouTube during Christmas time, I still mentally skip at that part.
Exactly.
Yeah.
I think that would happen here, especially to the Mariner and his friends. They would be like that one CD. They'd be like, oh, yeah. They would just accept it as part of the song, I think, right? He would know better, but they would be like, oh, yeah, cool.
I have actually inherited somebody else's knowledge of a skip in a record. A friend of mine told me about a jukebox at his school that had Any Way You Want It by Journey, and it had a skip in it, and he told me where the skip was. So now when I hear Any Way You Want It, I always repeat, another loving thing, another loving thing, another loving thing.
It's great.
And even though I never even heard that version, but it's there in my head.
It is.
Yeah.
I would want to, like, give someone a vinyl record of Billy Joel's Moving Out, Anthony's song, and just have a manufactured skip where he starts talking about heart attack. And as soon as you hit that ack, like, that's where it repeats. So it's just like another 3 some odd minutes of those acks.
Wow.
Oh, that would be cruel and amazing
It would.
all at the same time.
Speaking of YouTube, they're begging for that.
With an X-Acto knife, just kind of like find the perfect spot and be like, okay, here's where the scratch goes.
Yep.
Wow.
Similarly, with getting stuff, stuck on a longer loop, again, the CDs that were on the dorm room floor, there were at least 2 instances where, and this speaks to probably my dorm room life as well as my mental state, my roommate and I, we had on a CD and then it just kept going on repeat. And there were at least 2 instances where I know it was at least 12 hours where just nobody felt like changing it.
Oh.
Then it became like a marathon thing. It was like, well, we made it this long, so
We might as
Let's
well
see
go on forever.
let's see who cracks first.
Yeah. We'll tell our grandkids about this.
This is who we are. This is what we do now.
So I would absolutely not want to bring REM's Automatic for the People. Appropriately, title-wise, Enya's Watermark. Both of those were on.
Wow.
I think Enya Enya might have gone a full day, like
Holy smokes.
nonstop.
Oh, dear.
I think somebody was like, "All right, we're going to sleep now. I'm going to turn it off," and they're like, "Well, you're weak." Like no. And we left it on while we went to sleep.
That's great.
When my sister was early driving age, she had a crappy car, and it only had a cassette player. So she had the Friends soundtrack on cassette, popped it in there, wouldn't come back out. It was stuck in there. So it played on repeat, flipping side to side to side
boy.
for, I don't know, my memory says months. I don't know if it was really that long, but oh dear, it's still there. And with that soundtrack, they interspersed, there were little snippets of dialogue in between each
man.
movie.
Oh, wow.
So now when I hear one of those songs just out in the world, I remember the dialogue either before it or after it.
Totally.
Wow.
It's there forever.
With the mention of Enya, I just had the thought of how cowardly the producers of this movie were that he wasn't listening to Orinoco Flow in this scene.
Oh, my God. Yeah. That's an excellent point.
Totally. Or like the only CD that he's stuck with in the apocalypse is like, like rain sounds or like Babbling Brook, like relaxation CDs. And he's like, damn it.
I think there were so many opportunities to throw something in there to get a laugh, to get a wink,
Right.
and they were all missed
Yeah.
Oh, well.
for the sake of copyrights.
You could definitely put together a mixtape for, hey, the world has flooded and we need music to sail by. I'm pretty sure you
music
could
to
throw some
sail
Jimmy
by.
Buffett on there too.
Some Jimmy Buffett,
Yes.
some Christopher Cross, some Crosby, Stills, and Nash. Yeah.
Yacht rock.
Yeah, there you go.
Totally.
In the Waterworld, yacht rock is the only rock.
Right, that's classical music.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Helen walks up to the Mariner and she looks at this little setup he has with the pinwheel and the CD player, the pile of CDs, the computer speakers, and she asks, "Is that from Dryland?" And the Mariner, lying like the liar that he is, says, "Yeah, because this stuff is not from Dryland. Dryland is a tropical island, and this stuff is from the flooded civilization that exists below Waterworld."
Yeah, he has replaced Dryland in his own head with where he goes, which I believe we learn later is Denver. So he replaces that word, Dryland, with Denver in his head. And so in his own little story, he is answering truthfully.
In the grand scheme of things, yes, this was manufactured on dry land.
Yes,
Right,
it
yeah.
was from Dryland.
Yeah.
Yeah, I almost want his answer to her saying, "Is this from dry land?" I just want him to say, "Yeah, duh. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes, it
Like,
must
no,
be,
I
right?"
pulled it out of my butt.
Yeah, at
Did
some
you
point.
manufacture
it was
this
from
at the atoll?
Right.
No.
dry Right.
If it was from water, it would be yellow. Obviously, we all know
Yeah.
that waterproof things are yellow. So
Right. Like, was she imagining, like there's like a recording studio on an atoll somewhere, like pee on the soundboard.
it's like a transmission.
Yeah.
Right. So this is from Dryland. Or they're little tiny like mer people inside this box
Right,
playing,
there's sea monkeys in there.
playing generic jazz.
So Helen, she leans back against the jib and she wistfully looks out onto the water and she remarks that she doesn't even know the Mariner's name, and he replies by saying that he doesn't need one. Not knowing a lot about how things work on Waterworld, how children are named or anything like that. Every time people talk about names, I think that there is a lot of power in the name, that if you give someone your name, they have power over you. And either that's a real thing or I've heard too many stories about fairies in the woods.
Names are interesting because there are a lot of people who you're like, oh, he doesn't look like a Rick or something, or he does, like, oh, you're more of a Bill than a Frank or whatever. Names kind of do. I was going to say names identify people, but they do on a lot of different levels.
You boiled it down.
Thank you.
Yeah, if you don't have a name, you can always just be that guy from that one time.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
Yeah.
I have one friend, friend, who I mainly know as the guy from the other day. And the other day is the line waiting to see the Phantom Menace in 1999. And mainly, but he's still just like, Mark, the guy from the other day. I'm like, oh, yeah.
Yeah.
And so now it's been, 20 plus years of being like, the guy from the other day.
Yeah.
In that circle, a couple of people know what I'm talking about. I feel like people in bands and now podcasts to a certain extent, it's like your name isn't necessarily, your last name never really comes into it. It's your last name is what your band is or what your podcast is.
Right.
And so that we're getting more kind of into the original purpose of, maybe not purpose, but the original kind of function of names of like identifying, that guy makes candles, therefore I will call him Chandler. He will be on this CD that we're going to listen to nonstop.
Yeah. The more I think about names, the more I recall that in the Mad Max series, there's not a lot of importance given to names until you hit that fourth movie with Max refusing to give his name to Furiosa. And then it's a character point at the end where he says, oh, my name is Max. Like, no one cared what his name was in the other movies.
Right.
Yeah.
In Thunderdome, he was literally the man with no name.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I wonder if that's a societal reflection. Like now we're super concerned about our names because as we're interacting with a lot more people online, I don't know, I'm trying to make it more. Maybe I'm extrapolating too hard because I don't know where I'm going with this. But, because there's so much interaction with social media, et cetera, that now it's like, oh, you're all about your identity is your, screen name, essentially. So your name is how you're represented to a lot of people and not like the person I met at a party. Oh, what was their name? You don't know. Your first interaction is like, oh, this person's name,
right? Screen
name. And so maybe as a society, we're more concerned about, kind of, it's almost like branding and stuff. Whereas previously your actions spoke louder than words. I don't know.
And nowadays we've made that transition, like you said, Pete, with social media and whatnot, of the ability to choose our own names.
Right.
And there's plenty of people who, they have their birth name and they choose to change their name.
Yeah.
Whether it's because they have transitioned and are choosing a new name or just because.
Yeah.
I was born with the name Julia, but I don't really feel like Julia represents me. I want my name to be Rebecca. I can do that.
Mm-hmm.
I can legally change my name.
Even with professionals, like some people are born Henry Jones Jr. and he would rather go by Indiana.
Right.
Exactly.
I remember in college, a guy getting on the shuttle bus that was taking us to whatever, and it was like the first day that people were going to classes, and he's like, hey, everybody. You're like, got the attention of the whole bus. He's like, my name's Garrett, but call me G. And I'm like, okay, this guy just got to college. He's going to establish from the get-go his new identity. And I was like, is that going to stick? Like just announcing it on the bus? Are people going to start calling him G, or is his name Garrett? I don't know. We'll see. And I think it actually did work. Good for him.
I think a lot of people take that opportunity to change their, especially with college, to change their name.
Nobody knows me. I can start over.
My sister tried to do it, to change from Christina to Chris. It didn't really work.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Oh, well.
It didn't stick.
Yeah. I spent all of middle school getting my friends to drop the Y from the end of my name. Be like, no, I am no longer Ricky. I am just Rick.
That's
that
tough.
didn't work so much either.
Among some groups, it didn't.
Names stick.
Yeah.
They do.
They're hard to change. So the Mariner, I think he doesn't want that kind of commitment.
Yeah.
Do you think it's because he's embarrassed of his name? Do you think he's got a name that he's avoiding, or is he just not want to be kind of locked into anything? Is it more just kind of like, I don't want to, like, names are not names are too real for me, or is it just like,
Yeah.
well, crap, I hope they don't call me Irving. Like I don't want them to know.
Back in a 1991 script written by Peter Rader, who was the principal writer in this movie, and then he got replaced by David Toohey. He gave the Mariner a name in the script, and it's Morgan, which is not a bad name.
No.
Certainly not. It's not necessarily embarrassing or anything like that.
Right.
Well, how was it in the 90s? That's the thing you have to think about. I guess it's not too. I guess that wasn't bad because you had
Morgan Freeman.
Yeah, and Tombstone, you had Morgan Earp, so like
And it goes back to like King Arthur and stuff, doesn't it?
Yeah.
There's like a Morgan in that whole thing.
But I feel like since then it's become more of a kind of millennial's daughter's name.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, I feel like that happened in the aughts
Yeah.
Okay.
when it became particularly feminine with a certain connotation.
A little bit, yeah. Not to generalize.
That version of the script was very early on in the process before the Mariner was a fish man.
Okay.
He was still just a regular dude in that script.
He can't be named Morgan if he's a fish man, so.
Yeah. Now his name is Nemo.
I suspect that it's possible that he was never given a name because he's always been treated like trash because he was born a mutant, so therefore was thrown out and was never given a name. And he may also be taking that on as a badge of honor.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I'm outside of society. You don't need to label me. I'm just over here. Don't worry about it.
Right.
Like however you take his response, it does sound like a kind of like, shut up.
Right.
He's been a jerk to her completely this entire time. So like even if he has a name, his answer might be, I don't need a name. Stop talking to me.
Names are primarily used in how we relate to other people.
Mm-hmm.
And then that helps to drive how we relate to ourselves. But he has no interest in relating to other people.
Right.
And yeah, mostly no need to.
Yeah.
But I did just think about if he has like a fish name, like Daryl Hannah and Splash, like that would be cool.
It's really hard to pronounce.
Yeah, if they like drag it out of him and he's like, whoa, okay, I'm just gonna
Sorry,
call
I
you.
asked.
Can I call you Madison or Morgan?
Madison.
Presenting itself in stark contrast to the Mariner wanting to remain anonymous and not have connections to people, Helen gives him this scrap of fabric with the drawing on it and specifies that Enola wanted to give this to him. And then she also gives him the crayon because there's been this back and forth tension about don't steal my crayons. These are my crayons. You can't use them. Oh, I'm going to steal them anyway because I'm a child. So there's this whole mea culpa situation. Here is your crayon back. Here is a nice drawing. This is for you to tug at the Mariner's heartstrings.
Right.
I mean, he does, like we just said, like he's kind of like keeping her at arm's length and everything, and he's been a jerk to her the whole time. But this does kind of lead, like he asks about her. He's like, oh, she doesn't look like you. He kind of gets a little bit personal. And so maybe that gesture did sort of, create a little crack for him.
But is that, like she says that this is her word. Like, do we know, like, is she going to wake up and be like, where's my drawing? Where's my crayon? And want it back immediately? Is she like, is this really an olive branch or is she just trying to make things? She's like, look, if we can make them kind of a little more friendly with each other right now, this will make my trip a lot easier.
Yeah.
I love that idea. It seems like a very motherly thing to do, to kind of put words in her child's mouth.
Right.
Yeah. No, she really likes you. Yeah. No, she said you're cool.
Yeah.
Am I wrong that the drawing is purple, but she had taken a green crayon?
Yeah.
Am I missing something?
You're not seeing that wrong. That is 100% the case.
Yeah. Which means she, as a peace offering, gave back the green crayon, but she still has a purple crayon.
Right. Yeah. I didn't say I wouldn't give you back the purple crayon.
She took two, and then to make it seem like she was being nice, gave back one.
Yeah.
Like, oh yeah, I took your crayon, but
that's the move.
Or the purple drawing is from her magic powers.
Yeah.
She didn't really have to use the green crayon to do the drawing because she's drawing the future using, like Harold, she's using a magical purple crayon.
Right.
Yeah.
Oh, the movie should have ended with her giving him back the purple crayon as he's leaving. Here you go. You didn't know I took this, but here you go.
We've seen the box of 64 crayons, so there are potentially 62 other crayons in the wind somewhere that we do not know currently the whereabouts of.
In the video game, you have to find all of them to get a special bonus.
So I was going to say that was an anthology book, a Waterworld spin-off anthology book. Each one was the story of a different crayon.
Well, I mean, it was the 90s. Every movie was made kid-friendly, so there's their Saturday morning cartoon there.
Right.
I did want to know why she's handing him things over the turbine blades.
Right, yeah.
And she's like, oh, yeah, she gave
It's a
you
little
this.
extra
And it's
dangerous.
like carefully kind of reaching over. If it was now, I'd be like, oh, that's weird. They, put the CG turbine blades in where her hand goes.
Right.
But now it's like, wait, they really filmed that. Why would they do that?
They knew
How
that
is she
was there.
okay?
Yeah.
How does she not lose a hand?
Or at least hit that plastic against skin, whap, 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 as she lowers her arm a little too low.
Or just shreds she shreds the drawing as she's handing it to him.
Destroys the crayon.
Yeah.
Oh.
Sorry. It was really nice, I promise.
Here's a crayon.
It was the purple one, I promise.
The other day, this movie came up and somebody was like, well, why? I think at first it came up as like, how do they keep giving TV2 more money? And then it was followed up with what made Waterworld not work. And I think one of the things was, I like to compare too many things to Ishtar, especially I love that this was derisively called Fishtar by people. And
Right.
people were expecting something else when they went to see Ishtar. And I think part of that is maybe this. There's a lot of execution that could, that I think led to this movie having problems. But there's also a lot of like, oh, well, if we're throwing so much into it, it's got to be crazy spectacle. And if they had kind of just focused on a little more kind of, oh, let's just tell this interesting story of this, like rather than like, oh, before it was even released, there was already, video game tie-ins and theme park attractions and comic book, miniseries and stuff like that. One of the culprits is not letting it just live its thing on its own, that it got kind of buoyed beyond what almost, like, have you guys seen the documentary about the making of Island of Dr. Moreau, the 90s one?
Yes, we did.
Yeah.
That same, where it started out as a much smaller, the guy, I can't remember his name. The guy did hardware and then started, they're like, all right, you want to do an adaptation of this? Great. And it's smaller scale thing, but then to get it going, then all of a sudden, like, oh, like Marlon Brando gets attached and then it becomes way over his head because he's like, well, I'm not trying to make that movie. Then all of a sudden it's like, great, here's the action figure license. And it's like, whoa.
Right.
And it made him, freak out and run into the woods. And I get that. It seems like it got taken away from what it was.
Yeah. And it did seem like in the 90s, and probably still now, but like in the 90s especially, every single movie that came out had that entire machine.
Right.
The video game and the comic book and the action figures and everything's like, we're handing you this blockbuster that you will love, and this will be the movie of your summer. And if that didn't work, then you're like, oh boy, that didn't, it sort of like exaggerated the disappointment or something.
Yeah.
Or like, boy, I really didn't care. Like, you told me I was going to care and I really didn't.
The hype train was at full steam all the time.
Right.
Yeah.
Maybe like wait until maybe see if the movie's good or not, and then do the hype.
Okay, the title of the movie is Waterworld. If the movie takes place on a world covered with water, congratulations, you fulfilled the premise. That should be the beginning and end of your expectations.
Right.
Yeah.
Oh, since when does the media consuming public have any limit on their expectations?
It's true.
Somebody who spent a lot of time in the 90s working at a store that sold a lot of tie-ins to stuff like this and spent a lot of time, marking down merchandise from the Lost in Space movie.
Right.
Although it was a successful movie, but all the kind of tie-in memorabilia merchandise from ID4, like Independence Day, was a big bust. Like stuff like that, where they're like, oh, we're going to throw a bunch of crap at everything Star Wars now. Like, we're,
Right. Not everything needs an action figure. Not everything lends itself to an action figure. Yeah.
Right. Everybody just wants a repeat of the Star Wars model.
Right.
Without realizing the perfect storm that had to exist for Star Wars to have ended up the way it is now.
Yeah.
If you don't capitalize on that, and it's successful, then it's your fault. But if you do over merchandise it and it's not successful, it must be somebody in marketing. It's like, oh, we didn't market the film right, we didn't advertise it correctly. Right. Audiences were too tired of this kind of a thing, so let's blame the audience. it's only the fault of the corporation if they failed to account for that, if they missed out on doing it. Then somebody's going to get fired.
Who's to blame for this pile of Jar Jar action figures?
Yeah. I'm telling you, invest in Jar Jar. It's coming back around, and people are going to be like, they're going to be snapping them up. 90s nostalgia.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Blame it on the parents. Speaking of parents, the Mariner, as we mentioned earlier, comments that Enola doesn't look much like Helen, which is an interesting conversation line to pursue. The whole, thanks for giving me back my crayon. Thank you for acknowledging that she won't take it again. By the way, what's up with this whole mother-daughter situation?
Yeah,
Right.
Helen calls him out saying, I'm not her mother if that's what you're asking. That's exactly what he's trying to get at. Instead of just saying, hey, are you two mother and daughter or not? He tries to make some inane comment.
Yeah, almost like an accusation or something.
To drive the conversation there. Like, just to ask.
I love how bad at conversation he is because it's very appropriate to the character.
Yeah, yeah. I don't expect him to be smooth at all. No.
No, despite his jazz.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. He's picking up nothing from that jazz.
I expect him to be blunt.
She introduced a tiny, tiny crack for like him to, you know, it's like begrudgingly, she doesn't look like you. I don't care. She doesn't look like you. What's going on there? You know, right. He's asking, you know, oh, how do you know her? You are not her mother. So what's going on here? I'm getting a little personal. I'm curious.
Are we
I'm not gonna
child
admit it.
trafficking?
Right, yeah. Should I alert the authorities?
It is awkward, but she doesn't seem offended by it. She was just kind of like, okay, like, no, here's where the information you want goes.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's probably a common question that she gets.
Yeah.
Although I wonder, in that world, maybe that situation is totally common. Like you end up taking care of a kid who is not yours. You know, like everybody sort of, it's a free for all, and you know, oh, this kid is abandoned, and I'm going to help her.
We saw earlier in this movie that on atolls, when drifters come in, sometimes they are offered the young women of the atoll to impregnate before they leave.
Genetic diversity.
Right.
So the idea of mothers running around with fatherless children is not unheard of on this world.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, which makes perfect sense.
He might have been opening up the floodgates for, okay, we're in a sharing mood, so who did the atoll elders make you sleep with in order to get Enola?
Right.
Yeah.
That's
Right. It's a little bit like, what's your backstory?
Right.
And not like Enola has a backstory, which is different. But
Yeah.
it's like, what's your backstory? How did you get here?
I was wondering in the background if Kevin Costner, had to wear the feet webbing the entire time, or if they knew when his feet were going to be visible and when they were going to worry about it or not. Like the Hobbits or something. Did they always have the feet on?
Yeah, is it had to or wanted to?
Yeah, exactly. He was committed. Yeah. Always put the gills on, even if you didn't see him. Always put the webbed feet on.
Yeah. He strikes me as the kind of actor, oh, I'm in charge of this movie. I'm going to wear the feet all the time because I am the Mariner.
Yes.
Right.
This is my Waterworld. You're just living in it. Come to think of it, why doesn't he have webbed fingers? Like the man from Atlantis. And would that have been a better name for this movie? The Man from Atlantis.
Or a tie-in somehow.
Yeah.
Have a little crossover scene.
Right.
I'm still waiting for the Kevin Costner cameo in an Aquaman movie.
Oh, there you go.
Yeah.
I'm waiting
He's just
for it.
scrounging down below in sunken Denver or something in the background.
Do you think that this will get remade at some point?
Oh.
I don't think it made enough money initially.
Well, that's why. I mean, like second chances for stuff like this.
People seem to remake stuff that was already really good.
Yeah.
Well, that's the problem.
And so everybody has to be annoyed. Yeah, like, come on, we already have that. Don't redo it. It'd be like remaking Ishtar or Heaven's Gate or something. It's like, well, wait a minute. That was notoriously a problem. Like, why would you redo it? Like, almost ironically. Like,
It would have to be a passion project of someone's.
mm-hmm.
And that's what I think will happen. I think somebody who, we're not there yet. Now we're getting the people who liked the stuff from the 70s and 80s that, were like, they grew up watching these things on cable or whatever. And they, that's why we're getting, we had a Tron sequel and we had all this other stuff. And so in a couple of years, it'll be like, oh, no, I grew up watching playing with the Waterworld action figures and going to see the Waterworld stunt show. And I love this world and I'm going to make somebody who had a successful indie film is going to get tapped and be like, oh, let's do a Waterworld because it's going to be, expectations are low.
Mm-hmm.
I think I would like to see that. This poor movie, it has so much potential. It's got so many good elements in it. It just doesn't come together well.
There's nothing wrong with the idea.
Yeah. So
the basic idea is good.
Take another whack at it.
Yeah. They need to stop remaking movies that were good and start remaking movies that were bad.
Yeah. If it is broke, do fix it.
That had promise, but were the execution.
Yeah.
Movies that had problems in execution.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's a golden area for revisiting. But then would it be, do you do a Lego sequel where it's like, oh, you have Kevin Costner do a cameo as the old man who's handing something off to the, you get your Timothy Chalamet or whatever, who's going to be the new Waterworld, the new Mariner.
Yeah.
Do you have it just be a total remake from the ground up?
My vote is remake from the ground up, possibly using an earlier script from the development.
I was trying to think as I was watching it, like, how do I want this to be different? Like, what is not satisfying to me about it? And like, do I want it to be tougher and more of like a punch in the face, like the Road Warrior, like what they're kind of trying to do? Or do I want it to be goofier? Like, do I want them to embrace the goofiness like they kind of do with Dennis Hopper? Do I want the whole movie to be Dennis Hopper from this movie? Like, would that be better if they just didn't quite take it as straight and seriously as they try to sometimes and just let it be kind of crazier? Would that be a more satisfying experience? I don't know.
It's a good question. Something to consider.
And there is something about the look of it too that would benefit from not. I don't know. It's so tough. If there's a 90s look to this that really turns my stomach a little bit.
Yeah, and I don't know how do you explain that? How do you describe what that is? Because I was trying to explain to my son. How do you talk to your kids about Waterworld? I couldn't put it into words really.
I wanted to blame the cinematography, but it's also it's Dean Semler who also shot the Mad Max movies and the Young Guns movies and other things that look better, that look they don't have that weird kind of not gleam, but there's a certain, I mean, maybe because those are all dustier movies.
Yeah,
they
this
look better,
blue and shiny.
This is trying to make a dusty movie on water. Maybe that's where it.
Nowadays, you could remake this entire movie and do it like they do The Mandalorian.
Yeah.
Where you put everybody in a room surrounded by those giant screens and not in the middle of the ocean.
Right. Piece of cake.
Like Spielberg said, don't film in the middle of the ocean. And what do they do? They go to the middle of the ocean.
They went even farther into the ocean than they did with Jaws.
Do most of it in-house, and then, when you need some water scenes, you film them.
Yeah. Fill up a kiddie pool.
Yeah. Or just go to Universal and film that at the stunt show.
Exactly.
Yeah.
They got a whole stunt stage all ready to go.
Yeah.
Pyrotechnics are already set up.
Exactly.
Right.
Exactly. Here at the end of things, it's always good when two drifters meet that something be exchanged. So, Pete and Tom, could you please tell our listeners where they can go on the internet and find more of you?
The easiest place to find me and links to all my stuff is iamtomtaylor.com. You can find stuff about the novel that I wrote, In Memory of Todd Woods, over there. And you can find links to all the shows like Indiana Jones Minute, ABCDTOS, ABC Devo, The Ditch Diggers, Caddyshack Minute, Blues Brothers Minute. Gosh, I've been busy. Wow. It's been a long pandemic.
It has. Similarly, I'm at PeteTheRetailer.com links to most of my things. The active podcasts that I'm doing, Star Wars Minute, we're in the middle of The Last Jedi right now, and ABCDTOS, and the old things that I did, ABC Devo, Alphabetical, show called Nerd Geek Dork. That was my first kind of foray into podcasting, and I'm sure I'm forgetting at least one or two things, but most of it should be linked to from there, in addition to my social media things and all that.
As for us, come back next time. Helen will tell Enola's backstory, the Mariner will ask about Enola's tattoo, and the crayon changes hands once again. The Mad Max Minute podcast is a fan project by Rick and Julia Ingham.
Waterworld was written by Peter Rader and David Toohey, directed by Kevin Reynolds, and presented by Universal Pictures.
Mad Max Minute is produced and edited by Rick Ingham. Our opening music is Verdi's Dies Irae by Daniel Batista of danielbatista.com.
Our home on the internet is madmaxminute.com.
You can follow us on Twitter at MadMaxMinute.
And like us on Facebook by searching Mad Max Minute, and join our Facebook listener group, Mad Max Minute Beyond Microphone.
If you'd like to support the podcast, visit patreon.com/madmaxmin.
Thank you for joining us for our Waterworld episode 48. We'll see you next time.